Welcome back, listeners, to a brand new episode of the New Standard. And you're checking out the program on July 10th, 2024. As always, I'd like to give a big shout out to my co host, Neil Coulong, who will definitely be joining me during the season and we'll be breaking down Steeler football as usual. Also, want to give a big shout out to all you who participate in the program and listen to the program. Please hit me with a like and subscribe. You can check out the podcast, however you get your podcast, and please make sure you get that. Hopefully, everybody around the country has not been severely impacted by weather. And if you have been, hopefully, this podcast can be a little bit of entertainment for you as we break down the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward in the 2024 season. Again, please like and subscribe to the program. The title of the show today is We Don't Live in Our Fears, We Live in Our Hopes. And that is a quote from Coach Tomlin talking about playing to win, being aggressive, not living in our fears and in our hopes, and just hoping to win and being conservative and trying to win in that fashion. Now, I'm going to hit you with some stats in this show as I always do. I'm a CMU guy, Carnegie Mellon guy, Berkeley guy, so I got to hit you with some numbers. Numbers often tell part of the story, not necessarily all of the story. With that being said, the most important stat in football are dubs. Dubs are the most important stat. And there used to be a time where I used to fixate on how the Steelers won games. And if they were winning games in a particular way or in a certain type of way, that style points matter. I kind of shifted over the course of time as I've gotten older, and I've said that style points don't matter. However, I think I'm firmly kind of in the middle of that whole argument of style points matter, living in our fears against living in our hopes. I think there is a way to consistently win games, and there's a way to consistently lose games and not compete. And as I look at the Steelers, we've talked a lot about defense. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about the defense can't do no more. And I believe that. I believe that to the bottom of my soul that the defense has probably maxed itself out, that there is not much the defense can do to improve upon its points per game average. I mean, you're talking about a defense that's already given up under 20, about 18 a game, that there's not much juice in that squeeze to get that down much lower, considering that the NFL's best defense in terms of points per game were the Baltimore Ravens, who gave up 16.6. Kansas City was second at 17.4. So, because of that, I'm not sure how much more juice there is on the defensive side of the football, if any. That's why I think when you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and if you want them to compete for championships, we got to stop living in our fears and live in our hopes on offense. The Steelers have to look at winning games, in my opinion, in a different type of way offensively. I think they have got to be way more aggressive offensively, generate more big plays in the passing game, and really try to attack teams and be on the front foot. The way they play and where their point differential is, particularly over the last 5 years, you can't sustain that type of winning and you can't compete for championships in the Patrick Mahomes era if you are playing very tight games consistently. So I'm going to argue in this part one of We Don't Live in Our Fears, We Live in Our Hopes. I'm going to argue 2 points in this particular show. Number one, for the Steelers to compete for championships, they have to average at minimum 23 points a game per season moving forward. Number two, for the Steelers to compete for championships, their point differential needs to be around 5 points per game on average. Now let's break that down. In the last 5 years, if you want to look at Super Bowl champions and Super Bowl participants, the average points per game that Super Bowl champions have scored in the last 5 years, as I put this stat here, they are averaging 27.1 points per game. The losers are averaging 28.6 per game. I can't remember the last time the Steelers averaged 27 or 28.6. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you listen to the program, please pop those years in the chat. Hit me with a like and subscribe. Dare I say, I think the highest points per game they averaged while Ben Roethlisberger was playing, I believe it was about 26 points per game. I'm going to go with about 26 points per game. I think that's what it was, maybe about 26.5. And I believe in that year, I'm not sure they even made the playoffs. What I'm trying to say is, in the last 5 years, we have seen, and I'm taking the last 5 years as basically the definition of this is what football is, that we are living in this type of era when it comes to football, that you can't look too far past 5 years, maybe 7 years, if you want to start telling a tale of what the game looks like and how the game is being played. So, in my opinion, you can't go back to 2010, pull up that type of formula, and say to yourself, that's how we're going to win championships. Point blank, you got to win points. Excuse me, you've got to score points to win games. And the more points you score, the more paths you have, and the easier it will be for you to get victory because you have much more margin to work with. And that's where, when you start talking about point differential, it really brings up and it really illustrates the point. There are too many things that can happen negatively in a football game if you're constantly playing one score games and are in tight games. Also, the way the rules are situated, it's much easier on the offense. Although we've seen some defensive, resurrect itself and fight back in 2023, it's tough to win with that type of formula. Not impossible. And the reason that I put it at 23 points per game is because over the last 5 years, the lowest points per game averaged by a Super Bowl champion was last year by the Kansas City Chiefs at 22.2. And they gave up 17.3. What that should illustrate to you is, if you're going to score 23 points a game, you have to be a top three scoring defense. And their point differential was 4.9 to be exact. And if you're going to play that type of football, what that also does is that puts a ton of pressure on your quarterback to execute in crunch time and in pressure situations because you're not playing with a big margin. Now, if you look over the last 5 years in terms of points per game, they were overwhelmingly the lowest at 22.2. That's why the number again is at 23. You look at the Chiefs in 2022, they averaged 29.2, ranked number one in scoring. The Rams 27 the year before that. The Bucks 30.8 and the Chiefs 29.9. The average rank of scoring offense over those 5 years was 5. 5. The losers ranked fourth. You had the Niners coming in at second at 28.6, Eagles 29.1, second, Bengals 26.3, which was the low on the loser side, but that was ranked ninth. The Chiefs 29.4, ranked fourth when they lost to the Bucks. The 49ers 29.6, and they ranked three. What you can see on both sides of the conferences, that the most successful teams over the last 5 years have been the Chiefs and the 49ers with multiple visits to the Super Bowl. What are they doing? Scoring points and not giving up a lot of points. It sounds super simple. Keep it simple, stupid. Holla at your boy. Don't keep it into super intellectual. But right now, when you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, if they're going to compete for a championship, a lot of it is going to hinge on, and I'm not breaking any ground here, a lot of it is going to hinge on the performance of Arthur Smith, Russell Wilson, and Mike Tomlin, how quick they can get on page and how they see what is the best route for them to win games. Because if they take the approach that they have in the last 5 years of really being conservative offensively, trying to not turn it over, run the football, uh, and try to keep games close and play into making a couple of plays to win games late consistently, they're not going to compete for championships. That formula is just too tough, and it puts a ton of pressure on your defense and a ton of pressure on your quarterback. So going into this year, you have significant questions at the quarterback position. You have questions at the coordinator position with Arthur Smith, and I think you have significant questions at the wide receiver position. Make it easier for yourself. Be aggressive. Try to score points to give yourself more margin for error. Now let's shift reels and look at points per difference. Excuse me, points against or points for minus points against point differential. Let's take a look at that. In 2019, the Chiefs' point differential was 10.7. I mean, that's two scores. The Bucks was 8.6. The Rams was 5.1. The Chiefs was 7.5. And last year it was 4.9. All those teams are at least working with almost a touchdown. 5 points, that's a field goal, point here or there. They're almost working at a touchdown. And the average point differential was 7.5. Good teams that want to compete for championships are typically offensively dominating teams. Why is that? When your offense is clicking and you're scoring points, you're not playing in close games, meaning you can make mistakes and still win games. Because shit happens in football games. If you're winning by a margin of 10.7 points a game, and in that year, the Chiefs scored, and that was 2019, they scored 30 a game and gave up 19. You're going to win games. You're going to win a bunch of games. That's why I'm not surprised that they won the Super Bowl that year. And it's not as easy as just putting these numbers on a spreadsheet. But man, the Steelers have to figure out a way to score points and score more points consistently. Because what we've seen is they are going to be a top 10 scoring defense for sure. Mark that in the book. Most of the talent is on the defensive side of football. You're talking about Hayward, Watt, Minka, Porter Jr. And that's where the talent is. So, and they have a coordinator and a head coach that they're all familiar with. So the defense is going to perform well. If TJ Watt stays healthy, it will probably overperform. But if you're having an offense that is continually scoring under 23 points per game, you can't expect your defense to be giving up 15 a game, 16 a game consistently. It's just too tough. And it's just too tough the way the rules are. So, in this first part of the program, I really wanted to just jump into and illustrate those numbers and just really illustrate that something has to change. The Steelers have to stop living in their fears offensively. One thing will help about that is they've got to get more offensive talent. They've got to get a better wide receiver. And when you look at their wide receiver group in their core right now, that just doesn't feel like enough talent on offense. And what happens when you don't have enough talent on offense? You've got to scheme shit up. Again, hit the like and subscribe button. Holla at your boy. The new standard. We don't live in our fears, we live in our hopes. And if you have to scheme your offense up or overly scheme your offense up, trick guys to score points consistently, where you have to have a high execution based offense where you don't have an offense where sometimes, look, you don't execute the play well, but you just got hogs and you can get them the ball and they do what they do. Sometimes you need guys like that, like a couple of George Pickens. Because we even saw with Kansas City, even with Mahomes and Kelsey, when they had a lack of playmakers on offense, they averaged 22.2 with Patrick Mahomes. But in crunch time, Patty made plays and executed in the red zone. So although they averaged 22.2, they were still able to win a Super Bowl because, hell, they only gave up 17. So the Steelers have to get to a point where their offense starts clicking and they start scoring 23 and above. You can't live in the world of the 20s. If we score 20, we win. Well, if they want to continue to live in that world, you're going to have Dane and a whole bunch of Steeler fans ripping Mike Tomlin and the organization talking about they ain't won a playoff game since. It's a tough world to be living in a 13 to 10. That is a tough world. That is a place that you do not want to be. You can't live there. They had a year like that year. I think it was Ben Roethlisberger year when they beat the Patriots and beat all those, not the Patriots, the Packers late. And they won all these games on these late fluky type plays, late in games, and all these, and played in a ton of close games. Got to the playoffs and got rocked. Great teams are dominant offensively. Their defense complements their offense. Score a bunch of points. Smash people if you want to compete consistently for championships. The world of trying to win a Super Bowl, living in an era where you were trying to win one score games every week, just ain't going to get it. Average 25 and above, 23 and above. Hell, if you're feeling frisky, get 27 above. But it's going to be tough. I think it's just going to be really tough for the Steelers offensively because there's a lot of moving parts. You got new tackles. I don't know if they have a number two wide receiver. You got a new quarterback, new coordinator. I think it's going to be tough. I think early in the year, the Steelers defense is going to have to pick up the slack. But at some point in time, that offense is going to have to click and is going to have to average more than 23 points a game because the days of living in our fears and not in our hopes ain't going to work. And it's time for that to flip. Mike Tomlin has to turn it on its head. And I hope he has to, and I hope that the offense becomes more aggressive next year. Because, yes, the most important stat is getting dubs. But at some point in time, those dubs got to turn into championships. And you got to start giving yourself a great opportunity to win championships. And that starts with scoring points. But with that, we're going to conclude the program. Hope everybody out there is safe and sound. And with that, as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. Go Steelers.